Hey everyone. Sweet. So in this talk, I'm just kind of going to go through what I said about getting the Apple's attention. So for the last 3-4 years, I've worked on like 3 different consumer iOS apps. One was for a tech startup in the UK, used by lots of people. Another one was a side project, which then became like a full-time project. And then the last one, like my family have used, and that's it. But the other 2 before that one, lucky enough to either get featured by Apple as App of the Day or in the App Store in like the Hot Right Now section, new and noteworthy. And this has actually been like very valuable to me over that period of time. So valuable, so that my side project became a full-time project off the back of this. And yeah, so over the last couple of years, I've learned a few things from that, and just hopefully share any of the things that I wish I knew in the beginning in terms of that. And so when I said about getting Apple's attention here, this is more just primarily the benefits of that through the App Store, because you know you've got the Today's tab, you've got all the other bits throughout there. There's lots of other ways that's useful, but that's my experience so far. So I'll go through 4 things. So why Apple wants to know about your app in the first place. So this isn't just all about you, like Apple genuinely want to know about everyone's apps. So I'll kind of go through like what their motivation is behind that and kind of how you can take advantage of that, or how I did. The benefits for you, they might seem obvious, but just kind of, and how that differs depending off it, whether it's for your side project or whether it's for a startup or company that you work for, because they actually differ quite a lot. And then third of all, how do you actually get noticed? So if you decide you want to go down that route and it's useful to you, then kind of how you go about that. That's actually way easier than I thought it was. And then lastly, the process of actually going through that and what it looks like from start to finish. So Apple's motivation. So as I said, primarily the main motivation that you have is through the App Store. And what they want to do is they have a whole App Store in every country pretty much in the world, which they curate every single day, hence the Today tab. And there's like 20 chances to pretty much get featured in there. So you've got the App of the Day, you've got Game of the Day, and then they have like, as you see on the screen there, like top games right now, and they'll have like a list of like 10 different apps in there. And these are a mix of stories or a mix of just new and noteworthy apps that are out. So they have that, they do that every single day of the year. They have the apps page, which then is like new and noteworthy or hot right now, and then they have that per category. And so they do a lot of work to try and feature new and great content throughout the App Store. And we were lucky enough, so when I was at the startup, we actually got to talk to the App Store team in the UK, and they pretty much kind of gave us some inside tip, just some information that kind of like helped us kind of get a bit more notice. So some of the things that I'll talk about in here is some of the things they directly told us about. So nothing too surprising. On top of that, on top of just promoting you, obviously they do presentations throughout the year. They want to show off all the great developers in the App Store, because then developers will create more apps, which means better consumers, happier consumers, which obviously sells more iPhones, which is happy Apple. So they really want to be pushing people to build apps for their platform. So that's another one. And then lastly, obviously with WWDC, they spend a lot of time throughout the year just pushing out all these new APIs, all these new features. And so when I say getting Apple's attention, it's more like they want to kind of like bump their own chest, and they kind of want to show everyone how much of a good job they are doing equally. And so, we're gone again? We're back again. All right, I'll move the mouse. So they want to bump their chest as much as yours, so they actually want to show off everyone that's trying to use all their latest and greatest features, which is pretty timely right now with iOS 16 coming out. So they really want to show off all the apps that are taking advantage of like all the new features like Widget Kit and everything they're just about to bring out. So that's their main motivation. And then so your motivation, and I'll talk about this from 2 points of view. So one is solo developer. This is at the bottom there, that's the installs per day that I had, and then you can guess which day you got featured on the today tab, because you're getting like 20 installs a day beforehand, 20, 30 installs a day, got featured as app of the day, got 1,500 for that day. That was a good day. And then it kind of dropped back down, and then after that it was about 50 installs a day, and then it kind of sustained itself there for a few months. So clearly, as a solo developer, it's a no-brainer what the benefits are there. And then so the App Store optimization, so we started ranking better for all the key terms, and then that was obviously super useful going forward. And off the back of this, I then quit my job to work on it full time, so that felt good from my point of view. So very clear from a solo developer. This is the startup that I worked for, and you can't quite see on there, but the chart does not move. It's kind of just up and down. It doesn't. You will not see the spike of which day we got featured. And so if we spent a lot, and it took a lot more time to get featured for the startup, because you've got marketing team, you've got design team that want to get involved and part of the whole process. Whereas the solo one, it's just me. So there's actually a lot more sunken cost. And so the actual benefits of the startup, the company you might work for, typically, obviously, you'll get some installs, which is great. Maybe that's worth like $2,000, $3,000, maybe $5,000, depending on your cost per install. But the actual biggest benefit we got was hiring, because we was actually going for a hiring push at the time, and we actually saw more applications off the back of this, which is great. Not hundreds, but at least doubled the amount of applications we were getting. And then employee satisfaction, like the team actually genuinely worked really hard to get this across the line. That included design and engineering as well, or product, I guess. So yeah, two different benefits there, because if we really pushed the installs at the startup and we wanted to get this done, because it was a 6-week process, not full time, but just part of it. So if we really pushed this at the startup that we were all just going to do it off the back of installs, like, yeah, the company wouldn't have been happy, but they were really happy off the back of the employee, people applying for the jobs. So just something to keep in mind. And so then kind of going on to how the hell do you get Apple to notice your app, whether this is your side project, whether it's the company, how do you get noticed in the first place? This is what I really wish I knew at the beginning. So what we thought happened was there was this magical moment that kind of, if we just built this great app, and then Apple would kind of just one day just sift through the 3 million apps on the App Store and just be like, your app is so good, we're going to feature you now. So after 6 months, we realized that didn't happen. And we found out they actually have a page on their website. It's literally a page called How to Get Featured by Apple. And they have a form that you just submit. So you just hit that Contact Us button on there, and there's a form you fill out. And they tell you what they want to know. You tell them about your app, you give them the story, and then they decide to feature you off the back of that. So that was one thing I really wish I knew, because pretty much every app in the App Store is getting featured from the back of this. It's not Apple scouring 3 million apps on the App Store. It's good to know. So the process overview, kind of how this goes, so how it went. So there was a pre-planning process. So obviously, what are you trying to do? Like, what's your objective of this? Why? And when do you want to do it? So this whole process, you should kind of think of it more like a PR launch or something along those lines. So timing really matters throughout the year. If you're a football app, it's probably good time to go for it at the start of football season or through that time. When football season isn't on, Apple probably aren't going to feature your app. And you'll see this a lot if you just scroll through the App Store today. You'll see it. It's very much like a news article. So get the timing right off the back of that. Know why you want to do it. There's different ways you can submit the form depending on what you're going for. And then when it comes to the form submission, this is, they say on their website they need to know at least 3 weeks beforehand. So if you're going for a version release and you want to tell them about all the new great features you're launching, they need at least 3 weeks, because they've already got things in the pipeline that they're going to be featuring, and they need to get everything in a row to do this. So yeah, make sure you're at least 3-6 weeks ahead of schedule, and then depending on the complexity, it might just be a form that you're submitting with some notes, but you might actually be building a whole feature behind it, which for a larger company will take a lot more pre-planning. And then, so keep 3 to 6 weeks ahead before you do it. Make sure your app is in a good state when you submit the form as well, because this isn't like some mystical process. at least in the UK, it's a group of like 5 people, and you submit that form, they wake up in the morning, they get an email through on their phone or on their laptop, they look at the email, they read the form, and then they turn around to Steve and they said, Steve, did you read that? I like that. You know, it's like, it's a very human process. And so they talk about it amongst themselves. So when you submit the form, if they like what they see, they'll probably download the app and have a play with it as well. So make sure you have something good there, and make sure you articulate well what it is that's coming up if it is a future update that they're about to see. And then once you've submitted the form, everything's all good, you've done your update, then it's kind of like a waiting game, which is the most saddest bit because they don't actually tell you anything. Like, you just send it and it goes into the abyss and you will hear nothing. So yeah, but if you do hear, it'll be within a month's time typically from that. But you can keep submitting these all the time. It's not like a one and done thing. You can do this over and over again. And so going into the process, so going into the form, there's these 4 main sections that you can submit it based on, which are pretty self-explanatory from the names. And obviously the new launch that's coming up is just a one and done kind of thing. But the thing where you can submit on a very regular basis is on the version highlights. And Apple have said previously that they're not worried about you submitting all the time. So if you push an app every week or 2, you can still submit this form again every week or 2. A lot of the questions will be quite repetitive. And obviously you don't want to be like, oh, we changed this color of this button, it's wonderful. But you know, like if it's genuinely something useful and you're shipping quite regularly, you know, filling this out every couple of weeks is fine. And then the most popular one that you see throughout the App Store is the story ideas. Headspace, like the big companies are really good at this because it's normally like PR related kind of stories. So Headspace, you'll see a lot in there. Apple feature the same apps over and over again as well. You've probably seen that. It's like, it's annoying how much they do it. So if you can get their attention, this can happen again. And yeah, so the bigger companies are really good with the flashy headlines. And then for if it's for a side project, obviously you're not going to have juicy material all the time, but just kind of like go deep in the roots of like why you started it. Maybe that could be a really good idea of like what makes your app unique. So they really appreciate unique ideas. Like my app was pretty garbage when it got featured. Like I'm not showing you screenshots for a reason because it was really bad. It's quite embarrassing. It's quite amazing that they actually featured it, but I'm guessing it was more on uniqueness as opposed to execution. Oh, hello. All right, so yeah, kind of just going into the form process a bit. So it's not like an essay that you have to write. They actually put a limit of around 1,000 characters on each section. The describe your app section is probably the most important bit, and you'll see it on the form. And they purposely put on there, tell us what Apple technology that you use. And this is the bit where I say that they want you, earlier, you know, they want you to, you should be using their newest and the greatest APIs, and they want to show themselves off. And so this is the point where you can just kind of like jump on that and just be like, and this is super relevant for iOS 16 coming up, because probably all of September and October, or whenever they launch it, all of those apps getting featured. I 90% guarantee they're all the apps that are just jumping on the back of like all the new widget features or whatever might be coming out. So that's probably the easiest time to try and go for a feature, is probably around the time when you could get earliest on these features. Really, really useful if you're a solo developer because you don't have all the political problems within a company and trying hurdles to go through. So that's probably a really good point if you're a solo person to go for that. Yeah, your story, once again, we touched on that earlier, version highlight, same again. But it's 1,000 characters, so it's really short, keep it to the point, and do not be afraid to just submit these over and over again. For example, I submitted my first one probably in May a couple of years ago, and then I heard nothing back, submitted again 2 weeks later, heard nothing back, submitted again a month later, and that was when I finally started to hear back from them. And then for the next 4 months, I got some exposure. So it's, yeah, just keep trying. Other questions they also ask on the form are just really simple ones, like platform, like what platform is it, what languages do you support, what regions do you support. If you're all the way around the world and you're localized around that, that's a huge bonus because Mine's just UK, so I can only get featured pretty much in like the UK App Store. But if you touch on all the other ones, you can get featured on all of them all the way around the world. Yeah, and so that's a really, really useful. I wish I localized my app on that. Yeah, so this point is like really important, I think, from a point of view of Apple want to show off the apps that they think are really good. And what is really good to Apple is very different to what's good to us. Like I say, my app was really terrible in terms of consumer experience, but I just adopted all the things that they kind of wanted me to adopt. You know, I was like, jumped straight on SwiftUI, straight on widgets, and I was just doing that. And that is my guess of why it got featured. And that's same again with what we did at Cover. That's the startup. We didn't have any success for a long time, but we used quite a lot of interesting technology, but it was all kind of old school. And then we just started to do widgets and kind of like more gamification things, but it actually got us noticed in the end. So do not, especially as the new iOS 16 comes out, feel free to jump on that as much as possible. I will be. And so you've been picked. This is good. So this, like I say, happened like a month after, if you ever hit back. And this, you get like an email like this. It's pretty automated. And they don't tell you that you will be featured. They say you may be featured, which is very sad because you're very excited on one hand, and then on the other hand, you really don't want to screw something up. Because I think it was like 2 months after this email was actually sent that something actually happened. And I was so scared to push any release because they do not tell you when you're going to get featured. And they don't tell you if you will get featured. They ask for some certain things. So they asked for some artwork, which I didn't want to screw up on. So I like hired a designer to help me, and we spent ages trying to think of this great idea to send through, and about a week was spent on it, and they never used it. So yeah, so they just picked their own thing, and I'm happy with that. But it's, yeah, you really don't want to screw it up, but they just kind of leave you in the dark, which is kind of depressing in one way, because you don't want to put out a buggy release and then you find out the next day they feature you and then you're messed up. And I did that. I put a release out around payments and then got featured 2 days later and probably missed out on half of the revenue. So that was sad. So yeah, so key takeaways kind of in general is use the form if you're trying to go for this. Take full advantage of that. Feel free to do it on a regular basis. Adopt all the new APIs. That's really beneficial. Timing matters massively. So yeah, treat it like a PR launch. That's very topical. And then submit on a frequent basis. Once a month is fine. Don't think you've got to do it once a year or something. Also be very wary of like what the benefits are, because your company might be annoyed if you spend lots of resources on something that's actually not going to pay off for them. And then don't worry about being perfect, because like I said, my app was, I just really wanted to get featured just so I could tell my mum, basically. And and so I just kept submitting it, and then I finally did. So that was a huge, huge benefit. So yeah, that's the talk.
Do you have any questions?
After you get featured, is there like a time to wait, or are you more likely to get featured again if you do get featured?
So it seems like it.
Just repeat the question. You don't know for the online audience.
Okay, so if you get featured once, you're more likely to get featured again in the future. It seems to be the case, yeah, and it's very just stay top of mind. So like I say, when I first got, in either case, we were like kept getting featured again and again for about 4 months. Then we got comfortable and we're like, oh, they know about us, and we stopped submitting. And then, yeah, and then it just kind of died out for like 6 months. So yeah, very much keep doing it. And you'll see if you just check the apps on a frequent basis, they feature the same ones over and over again. Yeah.
Were there any other questions? Yeah, at the back.
I have more internalization questions, so I don't know if you have success.
Great. Yeah. Just talk.
So, internationalization question. So, are you across multiple regions or just only English?
So mine, sadly, are not localized, no.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just had a question. If you would submit something, or they do the writing themselves?
So it's just one straight form, and it's just a tick box, and you say, I'm in this language, this region, and you just tick the boxes.
So you basically write that copy yourself, and then they use it down in the text that's being featured, or?
Oh, yeah, so they will not use your copy that you submit to them. In the story one, you're trying to do it like that as much as possible, but they'll rewrite it.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Just repeat the question too.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I have a question about, you mentioned that you had to supply artwork through Apple, and that they unfortunately ended up using it. Like, did it have a requirements for what kind of artwork they wanted?
So the question is, on the artwork that you submit, they didn't end up using ours, and are there requirements for what it had to be? So they have, so you can see on their website, on the How to Get Featured by Apple page, they actually tell you kind of like their guidelines, and then they have their basis for it. But the email they send you, they don't send you any extra information. They just kind of tell you it's what you can publicly see at the minute. And then, yeah, so it's kind of like you hope and pray moment. So we spent so much worrying about it, but they obviously have their own aesthetic. So I think, I think put a lot of effort into it, just keep it on brand very much. But it also depends on what area they're trying to push you in, because the Today tab is one thing, I don't actually know what it's called, but right at the top of on the apps page is different. And if you get featured in other sections like, I don't know, Hot Right Now or New and Noteworthy, they don't actually tell you about that because they don't need artwork. And you just happen to be scrolling the app one day and you actually see you've been put there.
Was it like a trance, like what kind of artwork they ended up putting, or acted from what you wanted to put?
Was the question, was the content that they ended up saying about my app what I wanted it to be?
Sorry, the artwork that they ended up showing instead of what you supplied to them.
Yeah, so the artwork so the question is, what artwork did they end up using? Yeah, so it's just, we were trying to mimic what we were just scrolling through the App Store, and we were just like, okay, they seem to go for this kind of design aesthetic. So we were trying to match that as best as we could, but a lot of the people, I've not got too many good ideas on that. It actually just seems to range quite a lot. Sometimes it's literally just pictures of the people, and sometimes it could be very on brand, and sometimes it can be just completely irrelevant. So yeah, it seems a bit random.